The hall was bathed in an almost hypnotic glow. Crystal chandeliers reflected light in 1,000 directions, making each face seem like part of a painting. The clinking of glasses was soft and rhythmic, and the murmur of conversations mingled with the grand piano in the background. Everyone there shared the same air of anticipation, the company's annual event, the famous recognition gala. It was the moment when the spotlight turned to the best. Those golden walls had already witnessed tears, hidden behind smiles but also dreams being realized. That night, her dress reflected the same elegance as the surroundings. She had spent months working late, reviewing reports, correcting others' mistakes, and ensuring that every project was flawless. Deep down, she believed this would be her moment. After all, it was impossible for years of effort to go unnoticed. Eyes met. False greetings sounded like forced applause, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and social pretension. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. The director stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand and a calculated smile. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate the talent, dedication and spirit that drive our company." Every word seemed carefully rehearsed, and when he raised a small velvet box, the symbol of the promotion, everyone's hearts raced. The protagonist took a deep breath. Her heart was racing. She knew that the name announced next would define more than a career. It would define who was truly valued there. The room fell silent. The sound of the piano ceased. A whisper swept through the tables like a cold wind before a storm. At that moment, she still believed that merit would speak louder. The bright lights concealed shadows, and that night, everyone knew a promotion was going to be announced. They just didn't know the price. The ballroom of the five-star hotel was a spectacle in itself. The navy blue velvet curtains contrasted with the white marble columns, and the scent of fresh flowers mingled with the sophisticated perfume of the guests. A huge central chandelier cast golden reflections on the mirrored floor, creating a play of light that seemed to dance along with the soft sound of the string quartet. It was a meticulously planned evening. Every detail from the menu to the decor seemed to scream status and power. The staff circulated with crystal trays, offering glasses of sparkling wine and canapes decorated like tiny jewels. Polite laughter echoed from every corner, and the tables were filled with calculated glances. The protagonist observed everything in silence, with a discreet smile on her face. She dressed elegantly, but without ostentation. She had chosen a simple yet striking dress, as one who trusts that true brilliance comes from work, not from the fabric. While the boss exchanged greetings and posed for photos with executives, she reminisced about the sleepless nights, the endless spreadsheets, the goals achieved, and the times she had to correct mistakes. That weren't hers. She knew that the company's success owed much to her effort, and that ceremony was, for her, the stage where she would finally be recognized. Around them, the atmosphere was one of competition, masked by cordiality. Each colleague seemed to hide a mixture of envy and anxiety. Conversations revolved around rumors. Who will be promoted? I heard it's already decided. He has good connections up there. But she preferred to believe in merit. After all, she had won over difficult clients, saved projects on the verge of failure, and kept the team together during the worst times. As she watched her boss approach the stage, her heart raced. In that instant, everything she had experienced, the lonely nights in the office, the surpassed goals, the exhaustion hidden behind smiles, seemed to converge on that moment, the night of recognition, the moment when, finally, the spotlight would be hers. But amidst the sound of applause and the clinking of glasses, an almost imperceptible whisper crossed the air. The decisions were made a long time ago. The lights in the hall dimmed slowly, and the murmur ceased, as if the air had been suspended. The boss, in an impeccable suit and a rehearsed smile, stepped onto the stage with firm steps. The microphone was adjusted, and a beam of golden light enveloped him, transforming him into the center of attention. He took a deep breath, observed the audience, and began his speech with that controlled voice, the same one he had so often used to give orders or strategically praise those who suited him. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is about achievements, about people who stand out, who make a difference and who inspire us all. The sound of the words echoed through the hall, accompanied by some anticipated applause. The protagonist felt her heart pounding in her chest, each beat keeping time with the sentences. As he spoke, she remembered the long hours of dedication, the results that saved the company, and the goals surpassed. Without ever asking for recognition, The boss then held up a small blue velvet box, the ultimate symbol of the night, the promotional gift. Inside was the prize reserved for the future manager, a position she had dreamed of achieving through merit, effort, and integrity. The room fell silent. The sound of the piano stopped. All that could be heard was the soft clinking of silverware being placed on the tables. He paused. He looked at the audience. His gaze swept across the tables until it met hers. A brief, almost knowing smile appeared on his lips. In that instant her heart filled with hope, until his voice echoed, cutting through the air like a blade. "Congratulations, Ethan Clark. Your dedication and commitment are an example to us all." For a second she thought she had misheard. Time seemed to stand still. The sound of applause faded into the distance, muffled. She saw her colleague rise with an expression of feigned humility, straighten his jacket, and walk to the stage amidst calculated applause. The velvet box was handed to her, and the glint of the golden metal reflected directly into her eyes, a cruel reminder that the recognition she had hoped for would not be hers. While everyone celebrated, she remained motionless, her smile frozen on her face. Inside, the silence was deafening, a mixture of disbelief, pain, and something deeper, the feeling that the truth behind that choice was darker than it seemed. And at that moment, she understood. Sometimes merit is not measured by effort, but by alliances forged in the shadows. The applause filled the hall like a deafening wave, but to her the sound seemed distant, almost muffled, as if the world had been enveloped in thick glass. Each laugh, each toast, each pat on Ethan's back sounded like a cruel reminder of how invisible her effort had been. Seated at the table, her body stiff and her hands trembling on the napkin, the protagonist struggled to maintain a neutral expression. The smile on her face was a carefully held mask, like so many others she had had to wear at work. As the newly promoted employee took the stage to give his speech, she felt the weight of injustice accumulating in her chest. His words were empty, full of clichés and stock phrases, gratitude, teamwork, inspiration. She knew that behind that speech lay favors, conveniences, and unspoken secrets. Still, she remained silent, merely observing, without allowing the pain to show. Then, for a brief moment, her gaze met her boss's. He, still on stage, maintained eye contact long enough for her to understand the non-verbal message. There was something in his eyes, not regret, not empathy, but cold superiority, as if to say, "You already knew your place." It was a look that burned more than any words could. She looked away, took a deep breath, and brought the glass to her lips, just to disguise the emotion that threatened to overflow. The champagne, once sweet, now tasted bitter. Inside her, something was beginning to change. The frustration, which initially seemed like weakness, was beginning to transform into something different, a silent, almost imperceptible, but growing strength. While her colleagues rose to applaud, she remained seated, observing the scene as if it were a spectacle she no longer wanted to be a part of. She understood at that moment that the company for which she had sacrificed so much would never reciprocate, that there, merit was merely a disguise for games of self-interest. And in the midst of all that noise, the inner silence, the breaking point between illusion and truth, it was the kind of silence that didn't shout, but promised transformation. When the lights in the hall came back on and the guests began to disperse, she maintained the same polite smile, greeted a few people, and gradually moved away from the tables. The sound of laughter and cheerful conversation echoed through the corridors, but inside her, the emptiness was absolute. She needed to breathe. She needed to understand. She walked to the backstage area, where the expensive perfume dissipated and the glare of the lights gave way to the silent twilight of the service corridors. There, among boxes and curtains, the atmosphere was different, more real, more raw. That's when she heard familiar voices. She stopped instinctively, hiding behind a velvet partition. The tone was low, confidential. The boss and Ethan were talking. The words, broken up, began to piece together a puzzle she preferred not to understand. "You know I held off on this promotion for months," the boss said gravely, "but I needed to make sure the contract with Horizon came along with it." "And he came," Ethan replied with a nervous laugh. "I did my part, and now it's your turn." "Relax," the boss added, patting him lightly on the shoulder. "From now on, you have everything you need. Just remember who put you there." Her world stopped. The words echoed in her mind, reverberating like silent thunder. That Promotion, which she believed to be the result of competence, was in fact a bargaining chip. The recognition was a dirty deal, a transaction made behind the scenes, far from the eyes of those who actually worked. Her stomach churned, her hands sweated, and her heart pounded, no longer with hope, but with anger. Every sleepless night, every personal sacrifice, every moment she swallowed her pride, believing in the justice of merit. It all seemed to mock her at that instant. She stood still for a few seconds, struggling between the urge to confront them both right there and the instinct to remain silent. But then, something changed in her gaze. The pain transformed into clarity. She understood that war wasn't won with explosions, but with strategic silence. He left without making a sound. He walked through the corridors again, watching the employees dismantle the hall, as if they were also dismantling the facade of the farce he had witnessed. The night of recognition had ended, but a new story was just beginning, a story of silent justice and personal redemption. The hall was beginning to empty, and the glittering party atmosphere gave way to the calm of those collecting glasses and tidying tables. The protagonist walked with firm steps, but her distant gaze betrayed that something within her had changed forever. She was no longer the dedicated employee who believed in the promise of recognition. Now, there was within her a cold, calculated serenity, the calm that precedes a major decision. While Ethan celebrated his new position and the boss posed for photos, she discreetly returned to the IT room, a secluded area, almost always forgotten during events. She had full access to the company's system. After all, for years, she had been the one who created the organizational structure for clients, contracts, and projects. What the company called assets was, in fact, the fruit of her effort, her method, her intelligence, and now, ironically, it would be your true gift. She sat down at the computer, the sound of the keys being pressed like a racing heartbeat. She typed quickly, confidently, decisively. Each open folder brought back memories. Names of clients she had won over single-handedly, projects that had saved the company's reputation, strategies the boss had used without ever giving credit. Everything was there, organized, alive, and now free. While copying the files to a personal device, a discreet smile appeared. It wasn't a smile of revenge, but of release. This list wasn't just a bunch of contacts. It was the result of years of ignored dedication, proof of his competence, and more than that, the key to a new beginning. Outside, applause and toasts could be heard. "To the success of our team," the boss shouted, raising a glass. She, in turn, turned off the monitor, put the flash drive in her dress pocket, and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, she felt in control. She walked to the main exit, crossing the now almost empty hall again. The lights reflected on the marble floor like tiny stars beneath her feet. No one noticed her departure, no one followed her. But silently she carried with her what truly mattered, the fruit of one's own merit, and the chance to start over far from the shadows of manipulation. The sounds of laughter and toast still echoed through the hall, like a symphony disguised as a celebration. The boss toasted, the new manager was the center of attention, and everyone there seemed to believe they were witnessing the beginning of a new era in the company. But amidst the echoes of false praise and empty promises of success, she walked in silence, each step echoing like a firm beat of decision. There was no hurry or anger in her expression, just a profound serenity, the kind of calm that arises when the soul has already understood what needs to be done. Holding her small bag, she passed by the waiters, the distracted colleagues, and the glass doors unnoticed. The night outside greeted her with a cold wind, and the moon reflected on the skyscrapers, as if the whole world knew that something important had just happened. While the others celebrated inside, she crossed the parking lot, feeling the light weight of her newfound freedom. The air seemed different, cleaner, more genuine. Each step took her away not only from the company, but from a story that had become too small for the size of her dreams. In her bag, the flash drive held more than just data. It was a symbol of everything she had built, and that no one could erase. Her experience, her vision, her ability to transform relationships into results. True power, it was there, not in the hands of those who manipulated it, but in the hands of those who knew the value of their own effort. She glanced one last time at the illuminated building. Inside, the boss was toasting to a promising future, but she knew that future was no longer hers. Hers would begin far away, built on solid foundations, erected with ethics, competence, and courage. As she walked towards the car, she felt a mixture of melancholy and relief. It was strange to leave behind so many years of dedication, but something was blossoming inside her, the feeling that she had finally regained control of her own story. No scandal, no words spoken, no dramatic confrontation. Only the sound of heels hitting the polished floor and the noble silence of those who win without needing to prove anything to anyone. That night, as they toasted to power, she left, taking with her what none of them could ever buy: knowledge, contacts, and the conviction that time reveals who truly deserves applause. In the days that followed, silence gave way to action. She would wake up early, drink coffee while watching the sunrise through the window of the small apartment that now served as the base for her new project. The computer, still on an improvised table, seemed like the center of a new universe. No badge, no boss, no red carpet, just her determination, and the list of clients she had won through the sweat of her own brow. He created a name for the company that reflected its essence, something simple yet strong, like someone starting without grand promises, but with a solid purpose. He wrote emails, organized contacts, revised business plans. The fear was real, but courage prevailed. For the first time, everything he built was your, and not a stepping stone to someone else's glory. On the third day, a notification changed everything. A former client, one of those who always valued his dedication, replied to the email, "If you're starting something of your own, count me in." Within a few hours, others followed. Sincere messages, full of respect. "You were always the reason we stayed with that company. We trust you. We needed someone with your ethics." Each message was a reminder. True success isn't bought with status. It's earned with integrity. What others called insubordination, the market called leadership. What the boss dismissed as audacity, the clients recognized as vision. Soon, her little office took shape. A new desk, plants in the corner, a picture with the phrase she had been repeating to herself since the day of the party: never underestimate the power of silence. The phone started ringing frequently, contracts were signed, and the business that began in a modest room started to grow naturally. Ethan, the promoted employee, now faced pressures he didn't know how to handle. The boss, mired in internal problems, watched important clients discreetly migrate to the new company. She, in turn, wasn't celebrating revenge. She was celebrating freedom. The new beginning wasn't marked by fireworks or applause, but by a profound peace, a sense of poetic justice. What was once humiliation was now an impetus. And in the silence of the early morning, while reviewing reports and planning her next steps, a slight smile appeared. She finally understood that fate hadn't taken anything from her. It had only redirected her to the right path. Months passed, and the wheel of life began to turn with a silent, almost divine precision. The old company, which once boasted of its excellence and market leadership, began to show invisible cracks. Important clients started leaving quietly, projects were cancelled, and emergency meetings became routine. The glory of the past was replaced by the chaos of negative reports and phone calls that no one wanted to answer. Behind the scenes, hasty decisions and deals made for convenience began to take their toll. The boss, the one who had once raised his glass in the hall, confident that power was secure in his hands, now faced an avalanche of questions, accusations of mismanagement, lost contracts, and an internal scandal involving Ethan himself. In a few weeks, what was once authority had turned to ruin. The news of his dismissal spread through the industry like wildfire. Irreplaceable was the adjective he liked to hear. Dispensable was what he read in the official statement. The glass throne had finally shattered, and with it, the empire of vanity he had built. Ethan, for his part, was experiencing the bitter taste of a success that was never his. The position had given him power, but not respect. Without the protagonist's guidance, clients drifted away, results plummeted, and the team fell apart. What was once brilliance turned into loneliness. The title of manager became a burden he didn't know how to bear. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, her small office was thriving. New contracts arrived weekly, and her company's name began to circulate in corporate corridors with admiration. She, who had once been silenced, was now a point of reference. One afternoon, upon opening an email with a new partnership invitation, she saw something that made her pause for a moment. The sender was a former colleague from her old company. The message simply said, "We need someone like you to help us start." Over? She took a deep breath and smiled. The world turns, and each turn exacts a price for integrity. The boss lost his job, the promoted employee lost his shine, but she gained something no title could offer: respect, purpose, and peace. Time passed, but that night remained vivid in her memory, not as a wound but as the turning point of an entire life. Sometimes you have to lose what you believe to be essential to find what truly matters. She understood, with a mature heart and a peaceful soul, that it wasn't discarded. It was released. At that event, when the boss handed the box to the promoted employee, what seemed like a prize was actually a chain, and what seemed like a defeat was the key to liberation. Life has a curious way of correcting the course of things, and often it does so through the most silent pains. Today, she enters her office with the same calm with which she left that party. She greets her small team, observes the sparkle in the eyes of those who believe in the purpose, and feels her heart lighten. There are no applause or spotlights, but there is sense work. Once a prison disguised as ambition has become an act of freedom. That woman who once left in silence now inspires others to do the same, not for revenge but for courage, because understanding that justice doesn't always come from the system but from life itself is the first step in transforming pain into power. She learned that not all humiliation is the end. Sometimes it's the necessary push for a new beginning. That true success isn't in the title one holds, but in the peace of being able to look in the mirror and know that she made it without betraying who you are. Outside, the sun sets over the tall buildings and the city continues its hurried pace. But inside that small office there is a different kind of serenity. The serenity of someone who has discovered that true brilliance doesn't depend on spotlights, but on a clear conscience. And if she could go back to that night, perhaps she would be grateful. Because at that event she didn't receive a gift, he received a release. Have you ever experienced a moment when injustice pushed you onto your true path? Share your story in the comments and share this video with anyone who needs to transform pain into power.